Next up, I'd like to introduce Davy Givens, who is the Senator President Pro Tem and serves the 9th District, including Allen, Barron, Greene, Metcalfe, Monroe, and Jim Henderson's county of Simpson County. Senator Givens is going to give us a preview of the 2022 legislative session. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Senator Givens. Thank you, sir. Good to have you here. I don't know how much we appreciate it.
Good morning, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Senate President Stiver sends his regrets, and he gave me the latitude to talk about anything I wanted to talk about. So thanks for that opportunity to be here. Thanks for your participation in the process. I'm going to talk with you about a couple of things today. I'm going to start with an overview I'd like to share with you about my remarks. And these are things a lot of you know, but I'm trying to phrase it in a little bit of a different way as you've sat through a number of presentations over the course of the last few days, of which I'm told Lieutenant Colonel Darling's presentation was powerful. That was very powerful. Leadership in crisis is a fascinating thing, and I've always wanted to be a better student of that leadership in crisis process. Overview about what I'd like to talk with you. I'm going to break it down into what I call the immediate, which is basic blocking and tackling. We've always got to be able to do those fundamental things, so I'm going to call that our immediate conversation. The second portion of my remarks I'm going to phrase as tomorrow but soon. What are the things that are on the horizon that are opportunities and challenges that are running at us right now? And then the third part of those remarks I'm going to call not urgent but important. And that'll be the third part. I'd love to have some time for Q&A, but first I've got to start with a story. Always have great respect for county judges, and I'll share more about that, and fiscal courts, and I'll share more about that with you in just a moment. But had the honor of running in 2008 for the first time in the Senate District to fill a seat that was vacated by Richie Sanders. And in so doing, I ended up in Simpson County. Judge Henderson was then county judge there. Mason Barnes, who's county judge there now, did a wonderful job showing me around and introducing me to people as well. And with the filing window now open, as a lot of you know back home, that filing window is open. These campaigns are getting started. I was running my first campaign in 2008, and it was one of those things you've got to learn to meet people. You've got to make a good impression. You so hope that you fulfill in others what they see in you. So I'm on the campaign trail, and it's kind of a fall Saturday, if I remember correctly, and my wife and daughter have gone on a trip together, and I've got the two boys with me, Matthew and Michael, ages 5 and 7, and we're there on the campaign trail, and we've got 3 stops along the way in Simpson and Allen County. I want to do a reception, I want to do a cake walk, and I want to do a chili supper, all 3, and the boys 5 and 7, they've decided to venture on this journey with me. The first stop is at the old jail there in Simpson County, and we're honoring Dorothy Steers. She's retiring as a teacher, well-known, beloved in the community. Fairly nice event. I'm not dressed this nicely, but I'm dressed to be seen, to be recognized, and to make those really good first impressions. And so I start working the room. Everyone's lined up, nice hors d'oeuvres table there in the middle. I start working the outside of the room, and I see the 2 boys drifting toward the table. Yeah, that was my thought. I start watching as I'm working the room, and I see Matthew, the older, elbow Michael and say, "Michael, it's your turn." 5-year-old Michael takes the tongs and gets a bite-sized brownie and puts tongs and all right in his mouth. Now, this is a moment of crisis in leadership because I need to handle this just right. Everyone's watching, so I walk over to Michael and I pull on that little coat of his he's got on and say, "Michael, you can't do that here." And 5-year-old brown eyes look up at me and they say, "But Daddy, those pliers work so good." So when we talk about blocking and tackling, that immediate portion of what I want to share with you. You know these things, you've heard it from my colleagues over the course of the last few days, but these are the immediate blocking and tackling, fundamental things we've got to get right The first being this is a budget session that we're running headlong into, and we're running headlong into it, as the economist indicated, with opportunities and challenges both. The ARPA funds of $2.4 billion, of which we allocated about 1.2 in the last session, and still have about 1.2 left to spend, that's an opportunity. It's also a challenge because those are one-time monies, and we can't afford to build out systems that are going to require recurring revenues with one-time monies. That's part of that budget process. In addition, we're going to be running into an economy that's doing really, really well right now. But as the economist said, there are concerns on the horizon. Those concerns being, is it real? Is the money the federal government has pumped into our economies going to sustain our economies? Certainly, we've rebounded much quicker than we did in that 2008 recession. But in doing so, do we have a false positive here? So as we budget with about $3 billion of revenue, almost $3 billion of revenue above expectations, we've got challenges. Some of the slides he talked about, I'll be glad in Q&A if you have questions about our approach to pensions, if you have questions about our approach to structural imbalances in those transfers and what goes on inside our budget discussions, I'll be glad to share those with you. Those are things we're very mindful of. And again, it's fundamental that we get those things right as it relates to the budget. Education. Of our state budget of a little over $11 billion annually, 60% of that goes for education. Are we getting the most money for our dollar? Are we doing the best job we can? Vitally important we get that right. And so you will see us often focusing in the House and the Senate on education policy. That will be a focus going ahead, going forward as well in the budget session. Obviously, the road plan conversation's happening now, and I was encouraged by my staff to alert you. Work through your elected representative and your elected senator that represents your district. Share with them your road plan priorities. They'll work those up to our Transportation Committee chairs. It works a lot better if you'll work through the folks that represent you on both sides. Obviously, the bill starts in the House, moves through that legislative process there. It comes to the Senate. Back in the days when we had Democratic representatives in the majority in the House, it was a little bit of a different process. But still, please reach out to both. Double down. This is so important we get it right. In that conversation, there's another fascinating piece that suddenly it was on the horizon and now it's almost immediate. Taxing electric cars. We've heard a lot of conversations about that. 6 years ago, President Stivers and others in our body said, let's tax them now. Let's get it right today. Let's get the policy in place before we have a lot of resistance. We couldn't garner the momentum to do it then. We're going to have to do it soon. But there's going to be resistance now because the adoption of electric vehicles and the Ford announcement are going to create some headwinds for us to do good policy. And that's natural in the process. Headwinds are natural in the process. But boy, we so could have gotten this done before the headwinds started gaining momentum. Probably the most immediate blocking and tackling fundamental thing we've got to get right, and we've got to get it right really soon, is redistricting. Yeah, that redistricting conversation, and I know in many of your cases the reapportionment timing is critical too. There's some conversations I know that are going on there, but there's going to be seismic change. I will alert you now. The preliminary Senate maps, I haven't seen a final Senate map, but the preliminary Senate maps I've seen indicate seismic change because of what's happening with populations in the east and the west and the north central part of the state. That shift is causing Senate districts to change and will have significant impact. So be engaged in that conversation. Tomorrow but soon, the second part, and I looked at your agenda and it indicated you talked about quite a few of these things already, but tomorrow but soon that are on the horizon for us to deal with in legislative policy. Solar farms are one of those. I know you had a breakout session on solar farms. That's a conversation we've all got to be engaged in. It's a policy challenge and an opportunity at the same time. Workforce participation, the question that was asked about where are the employees going to come from for the Ford plant. The workforce participation challenge we face in Kentucky is vitally important that we get right too. We've seen an economic impact across county governments and state governments as a result of lower workforce participation. We have more people seeking assistance. We have fewer people that are taxpayers. We need to get that right, and one of the keys there is child care. Who would ever think that you at the county level could have significant influence on your workforce through child care? Be engaged in that conversation. We need you leading at the local level to help us get it right in Frankfort, because that's a conversation we've got to have. The broadband discussion, HB 320. I never thought I'd be talking about pole attachments. But that's a critical part of this conversation, and lots of money is moving on both sides of it. Those that own the poles and those that want to attach to the poles. They have dinner together at night, but they come to us in Frankfort on different sides of the issue. And it's going to impact our ability to get this vital infrastructure piece done across the Commonwealth. My last category, not urgent, but important. And my brother often reminds me of this. He's an academic leader in Virginia, at Virginia Tech, and he often reminds me to separate the urgent and the important. Every day crowds us up with all the things that are urgent. Respond to this email, return that text message, do all these urgent things, to the point that sometimes it crowds out the important. So my last category, things that you haven't really thought about, but maybe we need to be all collectively thinking about, that's this category of not urgent but important. The megatrends, what does it look like? What does the world look like? What does Kentucky look like in 2030? It's not so far away. It'll be here in the blink of an eye. Continued urbanization is likely going to happen. We're going to see continued population shifts into the more urban regions. Very few people realize this, but in 2010, we tipped from a rural state to an urban state. I didn't get that wrong. It wasn't 2020, it was 2010 that we moved from a rural state to an urban state. The majority of our population living in what's considered urban regions. That's only going to continue to happen. Demographics, as we live longer and have fewer babies, we become an older population. What does that do to the goods and services that your constituents and mine ask us to provide? It's important we start thinking about those things now. How does technology impact all of this? Very significantly. The automation conversation as it relates to workforce, that creative destruction component. If the prognostications on electric cars are correct and we get there, we're going to have a lot of change as it relates to mechanics, skill sets, talents, what we need to be teaching, what's going to be providing revenues in our community, occupational taxes. Technology is going to change a lot of that. How do we need to be preparing? Again, not urgent but important. The last one's a bit of an odd one, and this came on my radar a few years ago, but was driven back home again through a recent conversation with President Stivers as we were talking about a forum he attended, the Senate President's Forum. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity might be a really nice place for KACo and the area development districts to start looking at policies around shared cost of getting cybersecurity right. Because there are lots and lots of talented, nefarious folks in the U.S., but especially in other countries, that would love to send you a message, lock up and encrypt your data, and then send you a ransom note. It's happened to my small business. It happened to my small business about 8 years ago. You want to have a frightening moment? Try shutting off your computer for about 4 days. Your computers and your access to data, try shutting it off for about 4 days, and you'll discover you're almost willing to pay that crazy ransom. Our ransom request was $600. We ended up spending about $3,500 totally reconstructing the system because I didn't want to deal with paying the ransom. But it's on the horizon, and it's only going to get worse, so be prepared for that. Jim, it looks like we're running out of time. I'm glad to do some Q&A. I've got one quick story I'll close with, but if we have time for one question or so, I'd love to do that if anyone has a question. There we go. Please.
Here, Judge. Judge. Judge.
Oh, you got a mic. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Senator Givens. Appreciate our relationship. We've met several times. I appreciate you being with us to represent the Senate today. But you talk about urgencies, and I really think you need to hear what at least what me and some of my colleagues consider the most urgent. It's not an issue for many rural counties. It's the issue, is jail costs and how they are strangling our rural communities. In my county alone, COVID policy turning loose state Class D inmates cost us an extra $500,000 a year last year that looks like that may continue. And this is largely from what at least the people I talk to and everybody I've tried to reason this out with in conversation do not see as a fair burden to counties. The supermajority of these arrests are not made by county officers. All the laws on the books for why these people are in jail have nothing to do with counties. They're all passed at the state level. All the people all the way through the system that determine how long these people stay in jail are employed by the state. And we just get the bill. And it's killing us. Whitley County alone, relatively small county, 36,000 population, it's $1.8 million out of my general fund budget this year to help cover jail costs. This is the reason that I can't pay my ambulance staff what they deserve. This is the reason I can't pay my jail staff what they deserve. This is the reason I can't buy new equipment for my road department and I can't do extra blacktop. And to be honest with you, last year to see the state celebrating $1 billion surplus while I'm suffering with that issue was almost considered obscene, the way I looked at it. That needs to be a priority, and I hope that you hear us out. I think you can tell from the clapping, I'm not alone in this issue. Some of my neighboring counties are in much worse shape. I know Mike Mitchell was here from Knox County. He's struggling much worse than we are, but it is strangling out rural America and our ability to provide for our citizens. Thank you for hearing me out.
Judge, thank you for that. And I wish I could say I have a magic wand to wave and fix it. That is a priority. You have reinforced it with me today. I've heard you. I've heard the others, and I appreciate you reinforcing it. It will be something we'll take up. There's not going to be an easy fix. And I think the other part of the conversation we've got to acknowledge is that this is largely an executive branch decision to make some of the moves that they made as it relates to releasing and the impacts of COVID on these local communities. Trust me, we do hear you. We will be taking those up. Thank you for the question very much. Any other quick questions? Yes, please.
Jails, the cities, the annexation, I think it's putting a real big burden on the counties. They're taking all the tax dollars, but they're not being responsible, helping fund the jails, animal shelters, everything the county has to foot the bill for.
So we had a conversation a few years ago, and I had the chance to address KACo. I guess it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and the same question came up then, and it was very specific to some concerns in Hardin County that were going on. And I was hopeful that we could get that addressed. Efforts on my part and others were not successful, obviously, or we wouldn't be having the question asked again. We've got to address those concerns. We're all in this together. Our cities need to benefit. Our counties need to benefit. Finding that line is something that creates lots of conflict in our communities. We're seeing it and hearing it in occupational taxes, those insurance taxes, and other means of revenue. We're going to be hearing this session a lot of push for local option sales tax again. KACo needs to be involved in that conversation. Shelley, I'm sure you'll help lead the charge. And for those of you that are in the room and haven't heard this said, Shelley and the staff do a great job of making sure that your issues are heard and are of paramount importance to us. Thank you for the question. Last quick story I'll share with you as we close. I opened with a campaign story. I'm going to close with a bit of a campaign story and a challenge to each of you in the room, because we're not going to be gathered again like this in 10 years. We won't have the same people in the room. We'll have different people in the room, probably in 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. Different people will be in the room. I had the chance years ago to be influenced by something that happened to me, and my charge and challenge to each of you is, as you run your campaigns, consider what happened to me. Oh gosh, this would have been 40 years ago. 40 years ago. I'm 15 years old. My granddad, a magistrate there in Pulaski County, is running for county judge. He puts a 15-year-old behind the steering wheel of his truck as he drives and campaigns and works and greets and meets and tries to influence, bounding around Pulaski County roads that I never even knew existed. I was born there in Pulaski County but grew up in Greene County. That adventure with my grandfather stuck with me and still sticks with me today. He's dead now. He's been gone for about 12 years, and I so wish he could see and know, and I think maybe he does, the joy that brought to me and the influence that made on me. He's a Republican in Pulaski County. My parents and everyone back in Greene County are all registered as Democrats. I'm 15. The bug bites me. When I turn 18, I slip off and register as a Republican and don't tell anybody, especially my mom and dad. I call my granddad in Pulaski County first. I said, "You're going to have to help me break this news to Mom and Dad." He says, "I can do it." Find a young person along the way as you campaign. Take them with you. Introduce them. They're our future. Let that bug bite them, because we need them. Thank you all for what you do. It's been an honor to be with you. Thanks.